Hello, brothers and sisters, fellow Equatorians. This is Sabata with the EQUATORIA Advocacy Foundation. I'm the Director for Resource Mobilization and Project Management. This time, I would like to discuss with you specifically on how your socio-economic upward mobility is going to be affected by the failure of devolution of powers during this revitalized transitional government of national unity. There's a video that I did earlier that particularly spoke what you should expect, and on that video I specifically focused on how you, the Equatorians, would see less improved security conditions in your area. But for this time, I'm specifically going to focus on how your upward economic mobility would be affected by the failure of devolution of powers on this revitalized transitional government of national unity. But before I make that point, I would like to rebuttal a common understanding that the issue of devolution of powers, and by the way, I just want to clarify that when people talk of devolution of powers, people are talking about basically the practice of federalism. I would like to rebuttal the argument that devolution of powers is something that would be discussed during what is called formation of, it's a constitutional matter. There's a time when matters of the constitution are going to be discussed, and it is going to be at that time that the issue of a devolution of powers is going to be discussed. Brothers and sisters, this argument is a baseless argument, because what I would like to clarify for this matter, not only Equatorians but even all the South Sudanese, that during the revitalized forum for the resolution of the conflict of South Sudan, what has been negotiated and what has also been negotiated when ARCIS was negotiated, that practice over there was a form of actually negotiating provisions of your constitution. Those were practice of negotiating provisions of your constitution. Why? Because those provisions, those protocols that were argued, eventually signed, are not going to go away. Only those that needed to be taken out for some specific reasons. But those provisions are not going to go away. Those provisions were supposed to be amalgamated into what is called a revitalized transitional constitution, upon which the revitalized transitional government was going to operate. And when the government is then transitioning into what is called a permanent constitution, those provisions were going to be built upon. They are not going to go anywhere. So basically, those forums that produced those provisions were basically negotiating constitutional matters. All right, they were negotiating constitutional matters. So for that reason, the issue of devolution of powers and under a wise way to move forward, if really the country was going to or have the desire to implement federalism, that shouldn't wait. Because as we go through this revitalized transitional period, it is wise to understand exactly where the responsibilities of the states are and where their limitations are. It is also wise to understand the responsibilities of the central government and where their limitations are. It is best. And for the matters that cannot be divided to the state, and needed to be left to the federal will be left at that time. And for the matters that are necessary to be devolved to the state should be devolved to the state. You see, because in the absence of that, what basically is going to happen is this: what is called state governments are just going to exist by name, all right? But otherwise, they are not going to deliberate or administer on anything important as far as lives of people are concerned. And yet, the people of South Sudan are directly under the state governments, that is, under the governors. But their matters or their issues are basically administered from the federal. That is, and that will eventually render the state governments powerless on many issues of life that are directly affecting the people. And state governments will find themselves pushed to a limit where they would pretty much be dealing with matters that are very minor, that even chiefs could be the ones to deal with. You see, because some of the important issues, like, for example, constructing network of roads within the states, putting together what is called the state judicial structures, policing the states generally, will eventually be taken care of by the federal. And for that reason, the states will find themselves having no chance to administer on the issues that are directly affecting the people. And instead, they are going to be scrambling with the chiefs on matters that are not even important. You see, I would like to just clarify the area that the argument that federalism is something that needed to wait and will be discussed on some other times when constitutional matters are going to be discussed is a less informed argument, because basically what have been discussed during the Forum for Revitalization or during the Forum for putting together the provisions of RCs to begin with were basically constitutional matters being discussed. Because what are discussed, what are enshrined in Constitution? What are enshrined in Constitution basically are how powers of administrative structures function, or how powers are shared. Like, for example, in the West, powers are shared between the central and the state. And this is what constitutes what's called federalism, where the states have certain responsibilities and the federal have certain responsibilities. This is called power sharing between the central government and the states, all right? But of course, for us, for some reasons, people kept dodging power sharing between states and federal, which is federalism. In a state, sharing of powers was done through, well, it is basically sharing what is called powers between some administrative structures, but then those administrative structures were divided such that certain political organizations like IO takes some, the IG takes some, SOA takes some. You see, they did it that way. But basically, the point I'm trying to make here is those are constitutional matters, you see. So whatever has been argued already during those times for arguing during the Forum for Resolution of the Conflict of South Sudan, those were constitutional matters that have been discussed. And those are the things, those are the provisions that were supposed to be amalgamated into the revitalized transition, because eventually they were going to operate, or they are going to be the foundation, the constitution upon which the government was going to operate. That is a transitional government. And they are going to be built upon. They are not going to be going anywhere. They are going to be built upon as we cross to what is called a permanent constitution. So for that reason, a wise way to go was actually to have defined the devolution of powers in the beginning, even before the decrees were announced by which seats were filled here and there by some individuals, which was basically referred to as the construction of what is called the revitalized government. But those devolution of powers would have actually been defined so that now that the government has been formed, that is the transitional government has been formed, the transitional government will be operating such that states will have certain responsibilities on issues to basically administer the people directly, and the federal will also have responsibilities on certain issues here and there, and that is if federalism was going to be implemented. But for the fact that it has not been implemented, fellow Equatorians, I did say earlier how that is going to affect you security-wise. I'm not going to dwell on that again for the sake of time. You can watch that video, but I want to discuss with you how that is going to affect your upward economic mobility. You see, if devolution of powers had happened, what would have happened is state governments would eventually become responsible on basically delivering certain services to the people without intrusion of what is called the central government. That means if the state becomes responsible for the delivery of what is called healthcare services, educational services, in security, interior security within the states, all right, and construction of roads. What then would happen is most of your individuals who have gone to school and have studied and have graduated in certain specific fields like medicine, engineering, you know, and as far as engineering is concerned, I'm talking about those different sections, that is the architecturing and civil engineering and all that. So what those people could do is they will not all pay attention to figure out how to work with the federal government. So the federal government will stop to become like a very huge industry where it employs all educated or most of the educated people in South Sudan. No, because the state governments would also be able to employ highly educated people. And in any case, those people will eventually prefer even working with state governments so long as the state governments would be able to pay them competent amount of money as far as salaries, because the effect of what they do would be directly developing their states. For example, people from central Equatoria, those who are doctors, those who are engineers, those who are lawyers, would prefer to come together, associate together, and form association so that they will be building some networks of be it healthcare, be it educational, be it the judicial system within the state jurisdiction. They will build those systems and then try to put those systems to function, all right, with their state legislature overseeing how those systems are functioning and how they are delivering services to the people. And there will always be correction on what needs to be corrected, all right, and there will always be developments on loopholes, on things that needs to be adjusted here and there, because social matters, usually socio-economical and socio-cultural and socio-political, are always evolving with time, with practices. So and as that happens, most of those people who are educated in South Sudan will find opportunities to work within their states. And that will bring actually a form of competition within the states as far as developments. All right? Because I'm sure engineers, doctors, and all that who are coming from Upper Nile will prefer to go and work in those states and develop Upper Nile. Because generally, this is how the brain of our people work. Those who are coming from Bahr al Ghazal, doctors, engineers, will go to Bahr al Ghazal states and try to develop their states. Those who are coming from Equatoria would prefer to go to the equatorial states and develop their states. And before you know it, you'll find the entire South Sudan developing at the same time. That is, the states in the Equatoria will be developing, the states in the Upper Nile will be developing, and the states in Bahr al Ghazal will be developing. And all these educated people will find opportunities. While the federal government will, of course, be limited on what they are doing, pretty much working with international relations and overseeing some things here and there. But basically, most of the work will be done by the state governments. And that will actually be better than having what is called a unitary system, that is failure of devolution of power. And we end up having what is called a unitary system, where the central government becomes very huge and becomes like a very big industry that tends to hire everybody. And all the educated people try to squeeze themselves in that government sectors, and pretty much, of course, it's not going to be enough, and some people are going to be redundant over here, not having jobs and trying to figure out what to do. That is not a smart way to go. But, well, this is how, basically, well, with the failure now of this devolution of powers, fellow brothers and sisters, fellow Equatorians, and that if you realize very carefully, this is not actually just going to Equatorians. Even people from other states would have realized how that would have helped them. But, of course, from my previous video, I've always said devolution of powers is more important and of interest to Equatoria because of actually security matters, because security in the areas of Equatoria states are just being broken down because a federal agent like the national security tends to exercise what is called abuses of powers in a way that's not seen in the other regions. And that is what makes federalism to become specifically something that should be of an interest to Equatorians more than to the interest of the other people who are coming from Bahr al Ghazal and from Upper Nile. Even though federalism, for the matter of economic growth, as I've just explained to you, would realize that it's even important for all, not necessarily for only Equatorians. Now, why am I saying this? I'm saying this just to note to fellow Equatorians and also to South Sudanese that the failure of devolution of powers for this revitalized transitional government of national unity is eventually going to affect so much as far as socio-economic upward mobility is concerned. Eventually, it will have its effect in the socio-cultural, because if you're a Marxist, you'll always believe that the socio-economic aspect of your life shapes your socio-cultural aspect of life as well. So now the fact that we do not have, and I to a certain degree believe that, because the fact that right now, let me explain this, the fact that right now we have absence of this devolution of power, and federal has become a very huge industry that tends to hire everybody, and because there is not enough jobs, the government does not make enough revenue even to pay these civil servants. Generally, right now, culturally, when you look at people in South Sudan, there is what's called greed on money and resources. I've not been in South Sudan for a while, but I've also heard that the economic hardship that people are undergoing there have actually turned people culturally not to be very kind to each other. You know, people in South Sudan are not as kind as they had been some times back when they were economically doing fine during the past times of the government of Addis Ababa, or even during some earlier times when the SPLM was in the struggle. But for now, things seems to be going backwards, and even the hardship that people are facing in the socio-cultural aspect of life is affecting the harmony in the socio-cultural aspect of life, because people culturally are no longer kind to each other. People envy each other and sometimes become jealous of each other due to some economic conditions here and there. So and we see what Marxists used to say, kind of a stratification classes and dialectic kind of situation. You know, if you study Marxists, you will eventually agree with me that yes, there is also going to be a socio-cultural effect when this socio-economic effect takes place. So basically, brothers and sisters, in particular Equatorians, I've always made this to the Equatorians, even though some of the things that I will be saying not only applicable to Equatoria but even to all South Sudanese, that you can now see that this failure in devolution of powers that should have actually been done for the revitalized transitional government of national unity is going to affect you negatively as far as upward socio-economic mobility is concerned, and eventually that is where we are at. What should you do? I've proposed what you should do in some other previous video, but I can always add in this video as well that what you might want to do is pay attention to the holdouts, what they are saying. They are basically arguing some issues that are very, very important to be amalgamated into the constitution that basically would favor your lives as far as lives of other people who are coming from other places, especially when they argue that federalism should be considered as a system of governance, and I respect that, and you people should respect that as well, because and the other important thing that they are saying is that federalism should have actually been a system of governance right from the transitional from the revitalized transitional period. It should not wait, and that makes a lot of sense. Why wait? There's no point of waiting, because through this devolution of powers, we would have underwent what is called trial and error, because these are socio-political matters. On socio-political matters, those are basically issues that coordinate our lives socio-economically and socio-culturally. So basically, there is no silver bullet. That is, there is no one fix. There is what is called, you try something, it might fail. You try something, it might fail, but then you continue to correct it. That is trial and error, you see. I said in the other video that legislating conditions by which people would survive is something that is evolutionary. It continues, you know, and I gave an example. I said I live in the United States of America, and the Constitution of the United States of America was built long time ago, but as we continue life during this time, the provisions keep evolving. New stuff gets brought in, older stuff gets taken out, new stuff gets brought in, older stuff gets taken out. It adjusts accordingly with how people tend to also economically and culturally adjust in life. You know, it kind of tilts as people go, and protects and kind of fades. It protects what needs, it protects what needs to be protected, and funds off what needs not to be practiced. You see, and basically, this is the umbrella. This is what Constitution does, because it protects what needs to be protected, and those things that are protected are the ones that are called legal, and then those things that are left out are the illegal. So that if you go outside or overreach it, then it will be said you are unconstitutional or you are against the law. But as far as solutions is concerned, brothers and sisters, watch what the holdouts are saying. Hopefully, the platform of security would improve, and the important things that they have always discussed about federalism, that is devolution of powers, a parliamentary system, that is basically bringing powers to the people. You know, those are very important things, so that our parliamentarians will have the authority, the power to sit down and negotiate and discuss so much as far as coordinating how lives in South Sudan should be managed. Because what's the point of South Sudanese electing, electing what is called representatives to the parliament, if these representatives is not able to carry what the people, or how the people want to live and protect them in the parliament? What's the point of having those parliamentarians? It's pretty much more wastage of resources than having parliamentarians over there who are just like schoolboys. Power is concentrated right at the executive branch of the government. You know, it's of no point having those parliamentarians. But all those arguments are pretty much made by the holdouts. For that reason, fellow brothers and sisters, I would like to remind to you that the holdouts are making some important arguments that I think would coordinate your lives better, and you will be able to thrive at individual basis when those platforms are, when the devolution of powers are made. Your parliamentarians go and argue how you guys want to live at the federal level and also at the state level. Your governors and most of your state parliamentarians have direct control of the issues that matter to your lives. So with that being said, brothers and sisters, I would encourage you, Equatorians as well as South Sudanese, to look into what the holdouts are saying, and also to realize that for this revitalized transitional government of national unity, please do not support the very policies that are enshrining the very things that have constituted the root causes of our problem, which is basically the security. I'm not going to touch about the security. I've talked about it on my other video, that every time the security is maintained as units of militia here and there and not well trained, that constitutes actually one of the root causes of our problem that led to the issue of 2013. And those kind of things should be tossed out, and we the people should be very careful supporting those kind of policies, because we'll basically be going back to square one. Brothers and sisters, thank you very much. I will come again for another session of a video to discuss something specific, and I hope I've clarified exactly how devolution of powers could have helped in the aspect of socio-economic, and also eventually have influence in your social cultural. Thank you very much. God bless you.